Okay, so tonight is the second webinar. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we started and we explored how we might find purpose in life. And tonight I want to talk specifically about the shapes that our journeys take and how we can use the metaphor of the hero's journey to create a framework within which we can discover and create journeys. But not yet. What I would like to do is to start with an exercise that would just sort of bring us into the present moment. So I'm going to ask you, wherever you are sitting, just close your eyes and take a deep breath in and out and in and out, and try to breathe in for 4 counts and out for 4 counts. And just keep breathing like this for a few breaths. Now, let us try heart-focused breathing. Heart-focused breathing is a technique that creates coherence between the body and the mind, and it's a great way to alleviate stress and anxiety. It's about directing your attention to your heart area and breathing a little more deeply than normal. So as you're breathing in, imagine you are doing so through your heart. And as you breathe out, imagine that that breath out is through your heart. And if you want to, you can even place your hand over your heart as you breathe to help you focus on that location. And then just let us focus on breathing like this for a few moments. And while you're breathing like this, let's just affirm the coach state. I am centered. I am open to whatever may arise and welcome it. I am aware of everything that happens around me and within me. I am connected to the resources within me and around me. And I will hold the space for myself and everyone connected on this call tonight. Okay, and when you're ready, just come back into whichever space your body occupies. Open your eyes and just have a nice stretch. Welcome. I want to start tonight with a poem from the Canadian poet and shaman Oriah Mountain Dreamer. And she writes, "It doesn't interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for. And if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing, it doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for love, for your dream, for the adventure of being alive. It doesn't interest me what planets are squaring your moon. I want to know if you've touched the center of your own sorrow, if you've been opened by life's betrayals or have become shriveled and closed from fear of further pain. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it or fade it or fix it. I want to know if you can be with joy, mine or your own, if you can dance with the wildness and let the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes without cautioning us to be careful, to be realistic, to remember the limitations of being human. It doesn't interest me if the story you are telling me is true. I want to know if you can disappoint another to be true to yourself, if you can bear the accusation of betrayal and not betray your own soul, if you can be faithless and therefore trustworthy. I want to know if you can see beauty even when it's not pretty, every day, and if you can source your own life from its presence. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and still stand on the edge of the lake and shout out to the silver of the full moon yes. This poem makes me think of a really wonderful quote from the movie The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And the screenplay was written by Eric Roth. And in that movie, our hero says, "For what it's worth, it's never too late, or in my case, too early to be whatever you want to be. There's no time limit. Stop whenever you want. You can change or stay the same. There are no rules to this thing. We can make the best or the worst of it. I hope you make the best of it." And this is also supported by a really famous quote by the late Steve Jobs. And he said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future." So what does this mean for us? Often in the turmoil of the moment, we are lost. And we struggle to find meaning in what's happening to us. If we do pursue the habit of reflection and we take the time to look back at moments in our life, we often can start seeing the patterns and the meaning. But often we do not take the time for this level of introspection. We often do not have the courage to revisit dark times and painful experiences. But it's good to know that true growth only comes from asking the difficult questions. Questions that look forward. Questions like, do you wonder what would happen if you took the time to discover your true purpose? Or, what magnificent project am I drawn to that will create and define my legacy? Or even something as simple as, am I ready to change my life? But growth also depends on reflecting and learning from the past, looking into the past and asking, what did this thing that happened to me mean? What did I learn from it? And of course, how could I do it differently next time? Often these questions come from a deep yearning for what we see might be possible for our lives. Or it comes from regrets about the things we let slip in our quest to build a life. Or from painful mistakes we do not want to face and explore yet. Or from a call we don't yet understand, but a call which is growing stronger and more persistent by the day. In a way, we consciously or unconsciously understand that this yearning is just a trigger for what may follow, the start of a journey. Here I've got the picture of Joseph Campbell on the right, and on the left, there's the framework of the hero's journey. In his 1949 work, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, Joseph Campbell defined the hero's journey to have 17 stages divided into 3 acts: the departure, initiation, and return. This whole journey, which on your screen will run anti-clockwise, starts with the call to adventure, in which the hero begins in a situation of normality, in the ordinary world. And at some point, a call to adventure arrives. And that call to adventure can either be a yearning, a feeling inside, it can be an event, something that happens, or it can be an accident, something that forces you to go into a certain direction. And of course, going on to the next step, there's always the possibility of refusing the call. Okay. Often when a call is given, the hero first refuses it. And this may be from a sense of duty or obligation. It may be because of a sense of fear and insecurity. It can be from a sense of inadequacy or any of the range of reasons that work to hold the person in their current circumstances. Often, the hero refuses the call. The journey then ends there, and the hero remains trapped in a mundane world of their own making. They remain unfulfilled and stuck. Okay. Then we get to the next step, the meeting of the mentor. Once the hero commits to the adventure, consciously or unconsciously, the mentor will appear. More often than not, the mentor will present the hero with one or more talismans or information, and this will be things that will aid them later on in their quest. Then in crossing the first threshold, this is the point where the person actually crosses into the field of adventure, leaving that known world, the known limits behind, and venturing into an unknown world where the rules and the limits are unknown. This often requires an act of courage, and much uncertainty is carried in the heart of the hero to make this conscious crossing into the unknown. Then we venture into the belly of the whale, and it's as ominous as it sounds. It represents the final separation from the hero's known world and the known self. By entering this stage, the hero then shows willingness to undergo a metamorphosis, a willingness to change. And often when first entering this stage, the hero may encounter dangers or setbacks. Then he steps into the road of trials. This is a series of tests that the hero must undergo to begin the transformation. Often the person fails one or more of these tests. The road of trials typically show the hero their shortcomings and their weaknesses, and the things that they will need to eliminate in order to move forward. In meeting with the goddess, this is where the hero gains items given to them that will help them in the future. On a metaphorical level, this is where doors are opened, support is given, strong partnerships are formed, opportunities arrive, and the hero becomes ready to use these gifts and continue the journey. And of course, there's always temptation. In this step, the hero faces those temptations that may lead to the abandonment or the straying from the quest. Things happen here that often distract. And if the hero at this point yields to temptation, often he will move away from the hero's journey and it ends. At certain points, he may decide to let temptation go and re-enter the journey. But temptation is a very easy way out of the hero's journey. Then we get to atonement with the Father, or entering into the abyss. In this step, the hero must confront and be initiated by whatever holds the ultimate power in their life. It is at this point where the hero takes responsibility and ownership of their power, and transcends the doubt and the weaknesses that has been holding them back. Apotheosis, this is the point of realization in which a greater understanding is achieved. Armed with new knowledge and perception, the hero is resolved and ready for the more difficult part of the adventure. It is where the hero finds the understanding of what the newfound powers and skills can do. Then we get to the ultimate boon. The ultimate boon is the achievement of the goal of the quest. It is that thing or reason that drives the hero. It is what they went on the journey to get. All of the previous steps just serve to prepare the hero for this step, and it hands to the hero the success they have set out to accomplish. But this is not the end of the journey, because we still have to return back to the world. Now, often it is possible for the hero to refuse the return, because having found success in the other world, the uncertain world, the hero might not want to return to the ordinary world. He might not want to return to share the success with the community that they originally came from. It is possible that the hero might want to enter into a new world. Then we get to the magic flight. Sometimes the hero must escape with the fruits of success. And the return can be just as adventurous and dangerous as it was going on the journey in the first place. which leads into the rescue from without. Just as the hero may need guides and assistants to set out on the quest, often they must have powerful guides and rescuers to bring them back to the everyday life, especially if the person has been wounded or weakened by the experience. Then we cross over the return threshold. The trick in returning is to retain the wisdom gained on the quest and to integrate that wisdom into a human life, and then maybe figure out how to share that wisdom with the rest of the world. Which leads us to the hero becoming the master of two worlds. And this step usually represents the balance between the material and the spiritual, but it can also mean that the hero has become comfortable and competent in both the inner world of the soul and the outer world of the material world. And then finally we get the freedom to live. Mastery leads to freedom from the fear of death, which in turn is the freedom to live. This is sometimes referred to as living in the moment, neither anticipating the future nor regretting the past. Okay. In the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell and others that further developed the hero's journey, especially people that sort of approached it from Jungian psychology, they defined and used archetypes which the hero will encounter on their journey. These archetypes can either represent external role players or an internal state of mind. In self-development and therapeutic approaches, participants may be encouraged to act out each of these archetypes in turn in order to gain perspective, and then seek to achieve integration between often conflicting emotions, feelings, and actions. In short, these archetypes are the one that we've already met, the hero. The hero is central to the journey that plays out. During the journey, the hero will leave the world that they are familiar with and they enter a new unknown world. This new world will be so different that whatever skills the heroes used previously will no longer be sufficient. As the hero is central to our own journey, we have heroic qualities but also flaws. As the hero of our own story, it's very important to explore both strengths and weaknesses, not for self-congratulation or self-criticism, but for positive introspection that leads to greater self-awareness and self-knowledge. Going to the top, looking at the first archetype right in the middle, the shadow. Shadows typically create threat and conflict, and it represents the struggles that the hero goes through. It represents the energy of the dark side, the unexpressed, the unrealized, or the rejected aspects of something. The shadow typically is the negative face, the villain, the antagonist, or the enemy. Often, the shadow also shows up as the internal struggle that might be deeply repressed parts of the hero, and sometimes may unexpectedly show as unexplored potentials, such as affection, creativity, or other abilities that goes unexpressed, and it may even turn into positive opportunity. Often the shadow who starts as an enemy becomes a positive ally or a friend. Then the sage or mentor. Often the hero learns to adapt to the new world through the help of a sage or mentor. The mentor will teach the hero how the new world operates, and it helps to develop the abilities they possess. Mentors provide heroes with motivation, with inspiration, with guidance, with training, and of course gifts for the journey. Typically, the gift or help given by the mentor will be earned by learning, by sacrifice, or by commitment. Then we move on to the herald. The herald usually appears at the start of the journey and manifests as the call to adventure. The herald typically will announce in some form the need for change in the hero's life. The herald serves as the catalyst that sets the whole adventure in motion. While the herald often show up as a threat or as a regret or as a yearning, They can also simply just show a dissatisfied hero a tempting glance of what a new life could possibly be like. Heralds can show up in the form of a person, it can show up in the form of an event, or an awareness that highlights the need for change. Then we have the Guardian. The Guardian tests the hero before they face great challenges. They can appear at any stage of the journey, but they always block an entrance or border of some kind. Guardians are always expected at the thresholds. Their message to the hero is always very clear. Go home and forget your quest. To pass the Guardian, the hero always has to accomplish a major task to move ahead. On a deeper psychological level, Guardians represent our internal demons. Their function is not necessarily there to stop the hero, but to test if the hero is really determined to accept the challenge of change. Then we get to the Shapeshifter. The Shapeshifter blurs the line between ally and enemy. Often the Shapeshifter begins as an ally and then betray the hero at a critical moment. Other times their loyalty is in question as they waver back and forth. Regardless, they provide a tantalizing combination of appeal and possible danger. The Shapeshifter is a catalyst for change, a symbol of the psychological urge to transform. Then we get to the Trickster. The Trickster challenges the status quo. A good trickster offers an outside perspective and opens up important questions. The trickster embodies the energies of mischief and the desire for change. The trickster cuts down big egos and typically brings heroes down to their knees, reduce the ego. They create change by drawing attention to the imbalance or the absurdity of a situation. Then we get to an ally. An ally is a friend. It's a friend who helps and supports the hero on the journey. Often they are the resource that carries the hero when the hero is tired, wounded, or discouraged. And finally, we have temptation. Temptation, like I alluded to earlier, is what leads the hero astray. It takes the hero off their path. Often temptation stops the journey and the outcome will never be achieved. If the hero is strong enough and resists temptation, he or she will continue that journey. The hero's journey is prevalent in popular culture. It plays out in many movies, books, and plays. A very famous example, of course, is the movie Star Wars, which follows the hero's journey almost to the letter. Now, if you've seen this movie, it's a very familiar story. But if you've not, it's a great excuse to go and watch it for the first time. Or if you've seen it before, it's a great movie to go and watch again with all of the information that I'm sharing with you here tonight. The story typically follows the pattern of the hero's journey, and it starts in the ordinary world where we meet our hero, Luke Skywalker. He begins his adventure farming on a desert planet, Tatooine, which is normal for him. He yearns for a life of adventure and not the safe, uneventful one that he's experiencing or that his uncle and aunt is planning for him. Then he receives a call to adventure. His call to adventure comes when he finds a message in a little droid, R2-D2. While tinkering with this little droid, he sees a recording of Princess Leia saying, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope." And we know from that change has been heralded in Luke's ordinary world. He might not realize it at that point, but his life has changed forever. Then the movie goes into the refusal of the call. Initially, Luke refuses the call to join the rebellion and save Princess Leia. But when R2-D2 runs off, he wants to retrieve the droid more because he doesn't want to be in trouble with his uncle than a real sense of duty. After finding Obi-Wan Kenobi, he still refuses to join as he has work to do on Tatooine and he doubts his ability to be of any help. He then returns home only to discover that his uncle and aunt has been murdered and their farm destroyed. This leads us into the next step of Luke's hero's journey, meeting the mentor. After discovering his home burned and his family murdered, he returns to Obi-Wan and accepts him as a mentor who will teach him and guide him on the next stage of his journey. He then crosses the threshold by leaving Tatooine. And there's a very famous scene in the spaceport in the cantina where typical farm boy, he stops and he stares at all the activity in the cantina and he doesn't even know how to handle himself when an aggressive hooligan picks a fight with him. He's totally out of his element and he's totally dependent on Obi-Wan rescuing him and giving him guidance. Then if we look at Test's allies and enemies, around about this time, Luke gathers more allies to his cause. For example, Han Solo and Chewbacca. When Luke and his companions then prepare to leave Tatooine, the stormtroopers attempt to stop them. And with the help of these new allies, Luke then succeeds in escaping the planet with the droids on the way to Alderaan. Then we go into the belly of the whale. On the way, Luke makes preparations for the difficulties ahead as Obi-Wan begins teaching him about the Force and how to wield a lightsaber. However, they don't make it to Alderaan. They discover on the way that the planet has been destroyed by the Death Star. Fear and doubt then returns to Luke in the face of such a seemingly unsurmountable obstacle. He then enters the road of trials. After Obi-Wan leaves him to turn off the power to the tractor beam, Luke begins his ordeal. His ordeal is a test that he must overcome. And typically the hero overcomes this by drawing on his skills to defeat an enemy. And it plays out as the rescue of Princess Leia. Luke and his companions draw on their skills to mount a successful rescue. However, the success is not without loss, as Luke witnesses the death of Obi-Wan at Darth Vader's hands. And he has to consciously now step forward and accept the responsibilities of the hero. He has to accept the transformation in being the hero. Then we go into the ultimate boon, where Luke emerges from his ordeal a worldlier, more adult hero. His reward isn't a sword. Obi-Wan already gave him that. But he does join the rebel fleet as a pilot, just like he wished back on the farm on Tatooine. Then we go into the stage of the road back, the return. Now, instead of going back to Tatooine, Luke's road back requires that he joins the rebel offensive and destroy the Death Star. At this stage, Luke must also choose between his needs and the greater good of the rebellion. When he turns down Han Solo's offer to leave, he chooses the greater good. Then, the magic flight and the rescue from without. The climactic final battle takes place, the attack on the Death Star. Crossing the threshold. Ultimately, Luke succeeds in destroying the Death Star and he is saved by the intervention of Han Solo, his ally. Remembering Obi-Wan's words, Luke trusts the Force and he really comes into his powers. And at that moment, he takes the first steps towards becoming a Jedi, a scenario that plays out in the later movies. Moving on to the next stage of the hero's journey, the return with the elixir. Now, Luke's return signifies that his friends and the rebels will survive to fight another day. The elixir represents the success of the journey, and Luke's success is demonstrated when he's presented in the end by the medal by Princess Leia. If we look at his journey, he wanted to leave the farm, he wanted to join the larger universe, and he wanted to make a difference that mattered. And that's how the movie ends. Now, this is just one example. Many books, and specifically the example that I've shown for you on screen, the Harry Potter books, follow the hero's journey very closely. Another movie that I can recommend, which is a beautiful movie in the retelling of the hero's journey, is the movie Field of Dreams, in which a farmer has to give up his cornfield to build a baseball square. And he goes on an interesting journey and finds his mentor, and ultimately his boon also arrives in the, well, let me not tell you how that ends if you've not seen the movie, but I can really recommend it very, very highly. Okay. So what we are going to do here is to just look at a simplified journey, one that we will use in an exercise a little bit later on. And what I've done is I've simplified this, and the 3 parts I've renamed the New Hope, the Transformation, and A Brave New World. And if we start with the first stage, A New Hope, this is where we exist in the ordinary world around us. And then there's a call to adventure, and we can decide whether we want to accept that call or refuse it. So I'm going to ask you in this moment, in your own mind, just think of a time that some opportunity came up for you, but you decided not to follow through on it. And maybe make it an opportunity that worked out for someone else. And if you think about this opportunity, how do you feel now about not taking that opportunity? Often we let calls for adventure pass us by, and afterwards we experience regret at our lack of foresight. Or because we've not connected with our sense of purpose, we are unaware of the opportunity at the time, only recognizing it after it's gone, or after someone else has taken it up. So I'm going to give you another assignment. Think of an opportunity that you did take up and that you persisted with despite difficulties. I'll just give you a moment to think of that. And if you've got that opportunity now, just think, what were the obstacles you had to traverse before you finally committed to pursuing this path? And on your path of trials, what new skills and capabilities did you have to develop just to pursue this opportunity? And in the abyss, what doubts and temptations did you face before you took ownership and responsibility for yourself and started acting with your transformed skills and abilities? And what did you repeatedly do to consolidate and perfect those skills? And with all the new skills, abilities, and transformation, how did that make you better at what you became and created benefit for the ones around you? What benefits did it create maybe for friends or your family or your work colleagues? And how was this brave new world that you created better than the old ordinary world? And then if we go back to the diagram on the screen, over time, this new world will once again become the ordinary world in need of a new hope, a new call to adventure. And in some form, this pattern repeats over and over again. So how can we use this? By understanding this pattern, you will always know where in the cycle you find yourself. And by knowing, you not only know where you are, but follows next. And the benefit of that is it creates certainty. And if you have certainty, you are not helplessly afloat on an uncharted sea. You know what to do and you know how to proceed. Okay, so how do we proactively manage this? I've highlighted here in red some ideas. So in this cycle, when you are in the ordinary world, you can connect with your sense of purpose and the goals that flow from that. You can continuously monitor from your best awareness the calls for change and opportunity. If the call to adventure is one to be answered, you can embrace it fully. You can find the motivation that you need to go onto this difficult journey. You can actively seek out allies and mentors. You can learn as much as you can, as early as you can. Then, if you want to proceed, you can find what stops you, and you can work on overcoming that resistance to change and find a reason to cross that threshold. You can strategize how to meet and overcome your resistance. In the road of trails, you will find that you do not have all the skills and the capabilities that you need. But instead of letting this be an obstacle, you can go and gather those, all the while remembering that you do not have to have these skills yourself, but that you are able to find allies that can help and can produce those skills for you. Make sure to reflect and learn from setbacks, and above all, persist in overcoming what life throws at you, and keep the vision of what you want to achieve very firmly in mind. And then become the transformation. Master and practice the new skills and behavior, seeking out every opportunity to achieve success. And then consolidate. Reflect on your journey thus far. See how you can apply your new skills in different ways across different disciplines. And practice, practice, practice. And then especially let go of the hardships, the negativity. Decide what you need to forgive and forget. And then the return threshold. And you can decide, are you returning to a normal life or a new life? You make that decision. And decide for your return. How can you share the journey and your transformation with the world? Who can you coach? Who can you teach? Who can you mentor? What solid foundation can you create for your next iteration of change that will come in the future? Okay. Next, what I would like to do is I would like to take everyone just through a visualization exercise. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and you can mentally answer them just in a way to experience the process in your own mind. I'm going to distribute these slides to you afterwards, so if you wanted to work through these questions in a more formal way, you can do it later. But for the moment, what I'm going to ask you is to just, where you are, become really comfortable and sit back and relax. And you might even want to close your eyes now. And breathing deeply into your center, relaxing even more, connecting to your feeling of new hope. I want you to reflect. What is it that you are ready for? Create that image in your mind. What is the call that you are hearing? That adventure that seems just out of reach, but which is pulling you closer to it every day. Are you prepared to accept the call? And what will motivate you to do this? Who can help you or guide you along your hero's journey? And thinking about transformation, what are the new skills and resources you need? What are the new habits and behavior that you will practice? What are the obstacles that are lying in front of you? And how will you overcome it? And what will you learn from overcoming these obstacles? How will you integrate the new skills, the new resources, habits, behavior, and learnings? How can you let go of the old you to be the new you? Who or what do you need to forget, forgive, or let go? Now, in your brave new world, how will you be as a person with this new worldview? And what will this new worldview give you? How will this new worldview benefit others? How can you teach or share what you have with others? And just enjoy for a moment that picture and the insights that you've gained. And then gently just come back to the here and now. Open your eyes, stretch, and be here. Now we started with a quote and a poem. Let's conclude those. From the screenplay of The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, it continues and it says, the hero says, I hope you see things that startle you. I hope you feel things you never felt before. I hope you meet people with a different point of view. I hope you live a life you're proud of. And if you find you're not, I hope you have the courage to start all over again. This is a quote of hope, one that really shows us that life sometimes works the way we want it to, and sometimes it doesn't. But regardless of that, we can always start a new chapter. We can always start a new journey. And as Uriah Mountain Dreamer writes, it doesn't interest me to know where you live or how much money you have. I want to know if you can get up after the night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done to feed the children. It doesn't interest me who you know or how you came to be here. I want to know if you will stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you've studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else falls away. I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the empty moments. Oh, that's so powerful. Let me just read that again. I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the empty moments. Well, thank you. Let's take some questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute all. Okay, and if there's any questions, speak now or forever be silent.
My question is, how does one travel light or learn to travel light on this journey? In other words, we naturally take things on a journey with us, baggage, suitcases, full of stuff.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of journey that needs very light travel. I'd like your opinion on that.
Yeah, Dave, thank you. That's a very good question. Okay, there's a couple of observations there. I think the usefulness of the hero's journey. I read a while ago, I read an article about someone really criticizing the hero's journey and Joseph Campbell because of the simplicity of it. And I think it's actually not really that simple. But what Joseph Campbell did was he went and he distilled a central experience that unite rather than differentiate between different people. So on the one hand, there's the pattern, and the pattern gives us insight. On the other hand, and this is where I'm going back to the quote of Steve Jobs, it's not so much that you are aware of the journey while you are on it. It's more about looking back from the future and connecting the dots. And I think personally, unless you are extremely self-aware, and although I actually mentioned it earlier, if you are recognizing yourself as part of the journey, it's very easy then to say, okay, where do I go next? What can I plan for next? So in a way, the journey is there for us to build understanding and to learn from. In terms of the baggage that you carry, I think if you really sort of focus on the principles of being present in the moment and focusing on the here and now, a lot of the baggage from the past and the baggage that we project in the future just drops away. So I know that's a very long way of getting to the heart of your question. Does that work for you?
Yeah, it certainly, I actually quite like the idea about looking back from the future and connecting the dots from that. That's actually very, very helpful. But yeah, the here and now, that's also, that helps. Thank you.
Okay. Next.
So it was quite interesting, that one slide with the where you got the two worlds, and the concept is presented that we are going through cycles of journeys throughout our lives, where we go through trials and then we learn and we return, or sometimes we reject opportunities. And I think it's a nice pattern that can be applied, because I think you touched on something which was the concept that you could be, although life is quite uncertain, if you can identify the phase you are in, you can use the methods or pointers in terms of getting you through to the next step in the journey.
Yeah, I think, and I've just brought up this slide because it very clearly shows the cyclical nature of the journeys we go through. And for me, looking at this from the point of view of a transformative journey, it says to me that we cycle through this continuously. And every single time that you complete a journey, what you've merely done is you've laid the foundation for a next, more ambitious journey, up to the point where you decide not to accept the call to adventure. So yes, it happens over and over and over again. And actually, it's possible at any point in time that you are on several journeys at the same time. You might be on a journey in terms of your career. You might be on a larger journey in terms of the purpose of your life. But you might also be on another journey in terms of your family, how your children are grown up, the relationship that you have with your wife. So there might be a number of journeys that affect you personally that are playing out at the same time.
And then, Francois, I guess that was my only other question was, you know, this drawing here looks to me like you could, certainly below the line, it could be a bit like a pendulum. So sometimes you're in the abyss and then you swing or you travel to transformation, but then something takes you back to the abyss again, and then you go back to transformation or all the way back to the road of trials. And I guess maybe that's possibly the different where the different journeys interlink as well, because we are whole human beings. So what affects you in one journey, you might be on a road of trials in one journey, but in a transformation in the other. And so the first journey might take your second journey back to the road of trials. Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say. I mean, for example, if you look at this, which is just a slightly enhanced slide, if you stopped mastering your skill, if you stopped with your conscious habits, there's every possible chance that you might regress back into the abyss.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So
makes sense.
Yeah. Typically what lies then the bottom of the transformation, of course, is temptation. And temptation as a way of leading us astray. You know, I'm sure everyone that's on the air has had some sort of project in terms of the new year, I want to lose weight, I want to get fit. And then you start on this journey and then you get waylaid by temptation. And you either abandon the journey or you get stuck in the abyss or you get stuck in the road of trials. So yeah, there's absolutely the possibility to regress.
Regress, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Francois, is this something that you use with maybe as part of a coaching model or to try to get your clients to identify where they're at?
Absolutely, absolutely. From a coaching point of view, what this is useful for is, are you a coach?
Yeah, yes, part-time. But
okay.
it looks like it's a way to try and help a client forward as opposed to them being stuck.
Yes, this is a wonderful framework to use with clients, especially clients that are not very clear on where it is that they want to go, or that might be stuck somewhere. So this provides a framework within which you can coach. And
yes,
yeah. So I mean, I basically, if you, that little visualization that I took you through, you could very easily use those as questions that you would use in a coaching session. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because ultimately, if you look at a series of coaching workshops, you want to take a client on a transformative journey. You want them at the end of your coaching cycle to walk away a transformed human being, transformed in the sense that they cannot go back to where they were when they started working with you. And of course,
and sometimes and just explain to them where they're at in the process could be very helpful as well.
Yes, and you know, someone that is stuck, you know, and stuckness often happens here around about crossing the threshold, and it's useful to then say, okay, so what is keeping you? What is it that you need to let go of the stuckness and take you forward? Or if someone is experiencing lots of issues, I work with entrepreneurs and I work with innovation, and often people, they really get stuck on the road of trials, and they somehow think they must automatically get these skills by magic, and they don't understand that you actually have to spend the time, you have to learn these new skills, you have to master it, and until you do that, you can't move forward. So it's very much about picking up where your client could be in this cycle and then sort of facilitating them through a creative problem-solving process to let them go forward. I think also for clients, it's a real relief when they see something like this and they understand why they can't go to the outcome on day one. But that there's a cycle of learning, there's a cycle of growth that needs to happen before you get there.
Absolutely. And the nice thing you did was you gave us some of those examples and the movies, which is always nice to reflect with clients and, you know, so they can kind of see it in another way.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen that movie, the Field of Dreams.
No, but I'm going to.
I promise you, go and watch that movie. It's a wonderful, wonderful, positive and uplifting movie. But now that you know the cycle, see how you can pick up on the steps in that movie when you watch it, and see if you can pick out the moments that correspond to it. And this is a very universal tale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, super. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Francois, following on from 2 weeks ago,
Yes.
where we discussed Ikigai, which really resonated so strongly with me. And I'm also going to be using that with a client because he's really stuck. He's incredibly stuck. But I guess I don't want to overwhelm him. But the question is really, once you've found your sense of purpose, I guess this model is then how you get there. Is that fair to say?
I think once you've found your sense of purpose and you've connected with your purpose, this model actually becomes really easy. You know, sorry, Bev, just give me some background. Are you a coach or?
Also a developing coach, if you
okay, no, great. Yeah, that's wonderful. Welcome to the community.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think if you are looking to develop a client, I would sort of not hit them with this whole picture at once. I think as a coach, if you choose to use the hero's journey as a metaphor for growth, I think the first thing as a coach that you would like to do is you want to make sure that you are going to transform your coaching clients. Okay, small changes don't cut it. If you want to be successful as a coach, you have to be transformational. And you can take almost each of these little steps that I've got here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 steps, and you can almost build coaching sessions around each of those.
Yeah.
And not moving forward with a session until you can actually see that someone is actually passing through that stage and is ready to go on to the next stage. So the problem is if you just jump into purpose, and I should have mentioned it last week, 2 weeks ago when we talked about it. If you jump straight into purpose, purpose can be a very daunting undertaking to get to. And like I said, it's something that unfolds over time. And if someone doesn't clearly connect with their purpose, I would work on them developing awareness, becoming more aware in the world, trying to find the signals that is coming their way and connect with those, because then over time, purpose will emerge. Because the call to adventure is basically your purpose speaking to you and saying, you need to do this for me. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Before I take the next question, we've got 2 more webinars coming, one in 2 weeks' time and one in 4 weeks' time. The one in 4 weeks' time, we're going to dedicate absolutely on how you can use this model for coaching and for self-coaching. If you happen not to be a coach, you can also use this model for self-coaching.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Lyle, all the way from Northern Ireland, and you're so quiet. I'm hoping it's a malfunctioning microphone. Okay, I'm gonna allow one more question. Okay, if there's no more questions, I just want to sort of let you know, in September and October this year, myself and Sjoerd are going to be running 2 workshops. You can get more information about these workshops on our website. The description of one of the workshops are actually complete, the Break the Threshold one, and then we've got a second workshop, Awaken the Hero Within, which we'll be running from 30th of September to the 5th of October. And these are 2 5-day workshops that deal specifically with the concepts that we're talking about. And you can just go and have a look on breakthethreshold.com and find out a little bit more about that. Then from my side, I would just like to thank everyone for for being here tonight, and I hope this has been a good session. I will send out the recording tomorrow, and yeah, I hope to see you guys in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks, Francois. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, guys.
Great.
Okay.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.